In this video, I want to talk to you about table saw safety, and that's a really important thing because table saws, as useful as they are, they can be pretty dangerous too. So I want to cover this right away before we get into the details of adjusting and using and all that other stuff I'm going to talk about. First of all, you should never operate a table saw without proper safety glasses and some kind of hearing protection. Safety glasses these days are very inexpensive. These are great ones that I have from 3M. They're almost always plastic, so they get kind of scratched and dirty and things. So don't hang on to an old cloudy pair when you can get, 20 safety glasses for $30 or something like that. Just consider it a throwaway item. Very important because things can fly off the saw blade. As for hearing protection, there are different options. Earplugs, foam earplugs are one kind. I much prefer ear muffs though. They work really well, but most importantly, you can put them on and take them off. Because I don't really like to keep earplugs in for any length of time, and it takes a while to put them in. So I only wear the earmuffs when I'm actually cutting, when there's noise to be protected from. And if you get high quality ones like these 3M ones, they can be rebuilt because eventually the liner here starts to crack, the foam gets a little stiff. So you can just buy a rebuild kit. I've probably rebuilt these ones a few times already. So that's the extent of personal protection that you need for the table saw. But there's other dangers you need to be aware of. And I guess the first and most obvious one is having yourself cut by the blade. And that's where push sticks come in. So push sticks are not used all the time. It's actually safer not to use a push stick when the fence is a sufficient distance away from the blade. Now, what is a sufficient distance? Well, rule of thumb is the width of your closed hand. So any rip cut that's wider than that, you can just use your fingers, and that'll afford great control. Anything narrower than the width of your hand, the push stick is the way to go. And I mean, they're just as the name suggests, they all have a kind of a hook on the bottom that engages the workpiece, and you just push the wood through. Now, you don't necessarily need to buy one, although this is a nice one. It's got a magnet on it, so you can keep it handy. You can keep it handy because it'll stick to just about anything on your saw. But you can certainly make them too. I mean, this is one I've had for years. It's easy to trace. Just zip them out on a bandsaw or a jigsaw and put the little notch in place. The shape doesn't really matter too much. Although I do prefer this style to the kind of longer handled push stick style. I don't think they afford as much control. This one's low, but high enough to keep you clear of any dangers. Now, there is a third danger you need to be concerned about, and that's called kickback. Kickback happens when the rotation of the blade, and it's rotating towards you all the time. All table saws are like this. If, for one reason or another, that blade catches the wood, it can throw that back, and with quite a bit of force and in milliseconds. I mean, you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's going to happen, all of a sudden, boom, it's happened. And there are different strategies for greatly reducing the kickback hazard. And more on that's going to be coming up later. One of the things that has emerged over the last 20 years or so is the design of what's called anti-kickback blades. And this blade is a perfect example. It has the carbide teeth that actually do the cutting, but then there's this little rise of metal immediately ahead of the tooth behind it. And that little rise of metal is slightly below the cutting point of the blade. So what it does is it limits the bite that each tooth can take, because almost all kickback events happen when the tooth engages as the wood, and instead of cutting through, it propels the wood. And that's what you want to avoid. Anti-kickback blades go a long way to reducing the kickback hazard. After 40 plus years of using a table saw, I've only ever had one kickback event. And that was before anti-kickback blades became popular. You can't get the anti-kickback design in all types of blades because the very fine blades have so many teeth that there's no room for that little hump of metal. But most blades do have that, and I strongly recommend it. Also, as a final safety procedure, whenever you're using the saw, just stand to one side of the blade. That kickback event I was telling you about, it didn't actually hurt me because I was standing to one side. The wood shot out, hit the garage door in my shop. I'm shocked, shut the saw off, but there was no injury at all. So don't be overly afraid of kickback, but then also don't ignore the possibility as well, because you need to keep yourself safe. Now, no discussion of table saw safety would be complete without exploring guards. And that's what you see here. This is called an overarm guard. It happens to be raised now, but during use, drops down like that. So the whole blade is concealed. It's covered. You wouldn't be able to put your hand into it even if you wanted to. Now, one advantage of the overarm design is that you can hook it up to dust collection too. Because although most sawdust gets sucked out of the bottom of the saw, there's still a little bit, and the very finest of dust too gets kicked up above the workpiece as the blade is doing its thing. So the overarm guard sucks that dust up and really goes a long way to getting rid of the most annoying dust, the really fine stuff. Other saws will have a guard like this incorporated into the back part of the saw, so it's not really something that you can lift out of the way like this and it doesn't collect dust. But all saws are going to come with some kind of a guard, and to be honest, they can kind of be a pain to use, and that's why a lot of people don't even put them on in the first place, or maybe take them off after not liking them for a while. But I don't generally agree with that, because the guards are there for a reason, and it's just another layer of safety. Also, one other thing, if you look back here, you're going to see something behind the blade. This is called a splitter, and it's fixed, at least the body of it is fixed. But on the side of the splitter, there are these anti-kickback pawls, they're called. So they're spring-loaded. They allow the wood to slide in the direction it's supposed to slide during a cut. But if a kickback begins to occur, it's kind of like a ratchet wrench in a sense. It'll only go one way, and if the wood tries to go the other way, it's going to get caught on those teeth, and a kickback could be avoided. You'll probably still ruin your workpiece, but at least you won't have a flying projectile in your shop. There's a kind of a cousin to this called the riving knife. And a riving knife looks similar, but there are two differences. First of all, the riving knife goes up and down with the blade, and it doesn't have these anti-kickback pawls on it, at least not that I've ever seen. Some people prefer the riving knife. I'm quite happy with this splitter here. In both cases, though, one of the ways these things work is that they fit within the cut line that your blade has just chewed through, so during a cut. That's called the kerf, that gap left by the blade and the wood that is chewed up. Both the splitter and the riving knife prevent the workpiece from rotating, which is often part of a kickback event. The blade will grab the wood and rotate it very, very quickly, of course, and then end up throwing it around. So if it doesn't start to rotate, then you're short-circuiting the kickback mechanism. So those two things, very important. Don't operate the saw without them, except when you can't use them for a certain kind of cut. Like for instance, here, this splitter, if I wanted to cut some really narrow stuff like this, using a push stick, of course, I'd have to remove that, because that is preventing me, at least with the splitter and the dogs on it, the anti-kickback dogs or pawls, they won't let the fence get close enough to the blade. So, and also similarly, this guard is pretty wide, and if I want to cut something narrower than that, well, how am I going to push that through, right? I can't push that through. So you can raise it. The overarm guards, they They can be moved out of the way too. But like I said, that's for specialty cuts, and you don't often have to do that, but sometimes you do. I'm going to be talking a lot about safety throughout the course because it's very important. One huge advancement in table saw safety comes from saws that will not cut anything like meat. Okay? Believe it or not, there's technology out there that allows the blade to sense the type of material that it's encountering. And it's if it's electrically conductive enough, there's a mechanism that will immediately stop the blade or drop the blade, just get it out of your way. I'm going to be showing you an example of that a little bit later. A company called SawStop pioneered this, and they're almost without exception pretty well the only company that offers this. If you're at all nervous, you might want to pay the extra money for a SawStop type saw, just to keep you safe. You still want to do all the things I've told you about here. You don't want to omit any of them, but just as an added layer of safety, just in case everything fails, it could save you from a pretty serious injury too. So safety is important. I'm going to be coming back to that over and over in the course as I explain how these things work.